What does Volkswagen closing its German plant have to do with China? When did Germany stop being the safest place in the world to build cars? What happens when the country that built the modern car can no longer afford to make one? For almost a century, Volkswagen felt untouchable in Germany. Not just a car company, but a symbol of stability, jobs, exports, and industrial pride. If you had a job at Volkswagen, you were proud. That's why what's happening now really matters. For the first time in 88 years, Volkswagen is shutting down vehicle production inside Germany. The factory in Dresden is not Volkswagen's biggest plant, but symbolically, it really matters. And once you follow the reasons why, it starts in Dresden, but it leads to China. Germany today is different from the place I used to live over a decade ago. Energy is expensive, everyday costs are higher, and confidence in leadership is weak. Government approval ratings have fallen to around 21%. That's a historic low. At the same time, the government has moved to rapidly increase military spending and national security. So, what does that mean? Your food costs will rise. Your electricity bills will too. But your hospitals and social services, they will remain underfunded. This isn't unique to Germany. Across much of the Western world, voters elect governments promising stability, but nothing really changes. They call it elect and regret. Inside Volkswagen, the pressure is building from every direction. European consumers are delaying large purchases. Cars cost more, financing also costs more, and the US tariffs are slowing down these EV sales. But none of this fully explains why production inside Germany itself is being shut down. For that, we have to look east. For years, China was Volkswagen's profit engine. It paid for the German factories, German jobs, and German research. In 2022, the engine had stalled. Demand in China for foreign brands had collapsed faster than anyone could have anticipated. Local companies improved quickly, not just on price, but technology, the software, and the design. Brands like BYD were outselling foreign companies, the same BYD that Elon Musk had dismissed for their horribly ugly cars. Once Volkswagen lost China, the money was not flowing back to fund these research factories in Germany. In Hefei, China, Volkswagen recently built a massive production and R&D base under a in China, for China strategy. Software was being localized, development was aligned to Chinese consumer tastes because they saw what the Chinese companies were doing and they didn't want to be left behind. Volkswagen had said that their cars could be developed in China for cheaper and faster than they could in Germany. To put this simply, if a car takes 4 years to design in Germany, it would only take 3 in China, and all done at half the cost. Volkswagen had invested 2.9 billion into testing and development facilities in Hefei. They partnered with Chinese firms like XPeng, Xiaopeng to close gaps in their technology and development speed. For years, Volkswagen didn't allow cars to be developed in China to be exported. Doing so would undercut German factories and put German workers out of jobs. But now, things are changing. German factories are far too expensive to sustain without the help of China. And once production becomes too costly at home, they started opening up global markets for China just to stay alive. And that's not to say that the Europeans didn't try to slow down Chinese car companies. As Chinese cars entered Europe, policymakers responded quickly. The EU imposed tariffs of up to 35% on Chinese electric cars, but Chinese manufacturers adapted quickly. They shifted towards plug-in hybrids, which faced the tariff closer to 10%, and the sales continued. European consumers noticed something else. Even with the tariffs, Chinese cars were still more cost-efficient. Unable to compete on price, European automakers turned to politics. They lobbied their governments to soften or delay the 2035 ban on gasoline cars. Profitability came before the environment. At that point, the question becomes uncomfortable. Are we trading environmental commitments for corporate margins? Is that the legacy that Europe wants to continue? While over 50% of cars today being sold in China are electric, Volkswagen is currently warning that their cash flow will remain under pressure for years. Cash flow funds the future, and when it tightens, investments will also slow. And when investments slow, closures will follow. Last year alone, Volkswagen agreed to cut 35,000 jobs in Germany by the end of 2030. Across several plants, production has already been adjusted. Week-long shutdowns, reduced hours, and temporary closures. These were once unthinkable inside Germany. For decades, German auto manufacturing was protected by cheap Russian energy and global demand. The war in Ukraine changed all of that. Energy costs are rising, margins are collapsing, and this is how geopolitics reaches the factory floor. So, this is not a story about Volkswagen. This is a story where industrial competitiveness now lives in China. If it's cheaper, faster, and better to design and develop cars in China, companies will follow that logic. We've seen this before. In the United States, manufacturing hollowed, and an industrial economy slowly became a service, legal, and finance-driven one. Germany now faces a similar risk, not because it forgot how to build things, but because it no longer competes on cost and speed. When I look at this as an investor, I don't start with politics. I start by thinking as a business owner. If I own a manufacturing company, my priorities would be very simple. I want the lowest cost of production, the fastest development cycle, and I want customers who are willing to pay. At the same time, I'm responsible for my workers. People are depending on these businesses for their livelihoods. That means I can't afford to play political games. I have to make decisions that keep the company alive. And that's exactly what Volkswagen is doing. In industries like automotive manufacturing, where competition is intense and technology changes quickly, location matters. So does talent and speed. Right now, that combination is increasingly pointing towards China. That's where development is faster, costs are lower, and highly skilled engineering talent is concentrated at scale. This is when I look at the future of this sector, I pay close attention to companies like BYD, Xiaopeng, and Xiaomi. The old idea that Germany is an impenetrable manufacturing fortress no longer holds up. That can be uncomfortable for some, but as an investor, this is exactly where we have to be objective. And while the rest of the world looks elsewhere, this is where the money is to be made. Volkswagen shutting down in Germany isn't an anomaly. It's the start. So if you remember one thing from today's episode, let it be this. As energy costs rise and governments shift away from social services to national security, companies are going to move where they can still earn a profit. That's just capitalism. And when they move to China, follow the money and you'll start to see the pages turn before anyone else. Anyway, that's how I see it from where I'm standing. Let me know what you see from your side.